Things tend to move quickly in these situations, and things have to move quickly. And that's where we stand here with the Oklahoma coaching situation. And we will detail it the best we can and get your response here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome to a special edition of Oklahoma Sooners Live. The guy that makes this work is here and ready to roll. Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football. Jason, is the head still spinning?
Not completely, Mark. I mean, I think we've moved on from the shock phase to the phase of really just kind of exactly how long it's going to take to name somebody, and then what that looks like, because the big concern right now is recruiting not only the 2022 class, but certainly the existing players that are on campus as well.
So, again, we invite everyone in to join the conversation. Bring your comments and questions, and we will get to as many as possible while still covering the situation in Norman. Situation is that Lincoln Riley's in Los Angeles coaching USC. I saw his, didn't see his news conference. I caught his interaction with the media outside the news conference, which sometimes is a little bit more telling and a little bit more revealing. Caught that last night. Meanwhile, in Norman, Bob Stoops has taken over for the bowl game. And as Jason was just detailing for me before we started to go live, Bob Stoops is definitely entrenched in not just getting together a game plan for a bowl game and working with the coaches and players, but doing his very best to, Jason, protect the future of Oklahoma football.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think and Oklahoma held a press conference yesterday just to, I think, really more than anything, just to kind of provide a united front for Sooner fans and just the media and things like that. That just kind of talks about really kind of a united front. Just say, hey, the sky is not necessarily falling, because for all intents and purposes, and I think Notre Dame's probably going through the same things today, but for all intents and purposes, it kind of has the feel of like getting hit by probation, from that situation. I know it's not the same thing, but you've got so many coaches that are leaving. You've got your head coach that are leaving. You've got Oklahoma had like 3 or 4 guys, maybe more, on the 2021 team that hit the portal. They're up to about 8 or 9 decommitments between the 2022 and 2023 class. So I think all of that, that's the way it feels. But no, you're exactly right, Mark. I think he is, and I think he talked about the story. The story was that when the kind of when the news hit on Sunday afternoon, he was on the golf course, and he got a call from Joe Castiglione asking if he would be the interim coach with everything that was going on. And he said that he wasn't. He joked and said he wasn't playing very well, so he picked up the phone. So he immediately he went to Norman, was involved in really the kind of the meetings with the players when Lincoln Riley announced to the players that he was going to go to USC, and has mentioned he has had several conversations with the players family. And then, as you pointed out, Mark, he had mentioned that he was going out recruiting almost immediately, starting yesterday. So I think, more so, I think it's probably trying to keep the wheels on the bus, so to speak, with a lot of those commitments. There's been some decommitments, really mostly the guys that they've had, out of California. And I think the big, kind of the big area that was hit was on the 2023 cycle. They've had three or four of the 5-star guys that were from California have decommitted. So, and I think a lot of these kids are taking a wait and see perspective on this. Not necessarily, either some of them are hitting the transfer portal or decommitting, but really just trying to see exactly who it is that Oklahoma is going to name before they make a decision. Obviously, the 2023 kids have a lot of time to wait to make that decision. However, the 2022 kids, they don't have a whole lot of time. Yes, they don't necessarily have to commit in this early signing period, but as we've seen over the last couple of years that a lot of them do. So lots of moving parts, lots of decisions that have to be made. But thankfully for Oklahoma has somebody that's very, very familiar with the program, very familiar with everything, and he seemed, he seemed, number one, he seemed a little upset, which, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, hurt feelings within within the program itself. But I think more than that, he seemed that he was in a place that was really excited to even get back on the road. He even made a joke that his wife was probably excited to get him out of the house, for a while, for a few days. And so, I think one of the things that was interesting coming out of that press conference, Mark, was that, that he mentioned, number one, that he has no interest whatsoever in being the full-time coach. He made that clear. So, we talked about that. So I think that that ship has sailed in terms of that being an opportunity. But he was, very clear about how excited and how happy he was to be able to be in a position to step in and help. So Oklahoma's in a good spot where maybe other programs may not necessarily be, that they have. With these coaching changes, the assistant coaches are in such a hard position, right? Because you essentially you don't have a job if you choose not to follow the head coach wherever he goes. You don't have a job, and you're just staying there on faith, hoping that the new regime, the new head coach will keep you on. So so there was a few guys that are still there that a little bit surprised. Bill Beanbo's still there. Roy Manning is still at Oklahoma as of right now. Let's see, Brian Odom is still at Oklahoma, although I would anticipate him going with Riley to USC. But yeah, no, I think it's interesting that they've got someone that is able to bridge the gap here, and hit the ground running pretty much immediately.
Jason Ray's here, as he always is, to cover Oklahoma football for us here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everybody being here. Please like the video. Share these links out on social media, because if you enjoy the conversation, whether that be a live stream or a video post, please share the videos out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and who knows what other social media platforms are out there that I'm not aware of. Mm-hmm. And of course, subscribe here. That way, when we go live or upload new content, you get the notification, and you can jump on. All right. There are 2 points that I'd like to hit on among many based on what you just said. One being the recruiting. So the recruiting aspect, there are different reasons why student athletes choose a school to play sports and go to school. But we can pretty much put those in a bucket, and they're different priority lists for different players. But yeah, you have that that situation where a particular student athlete is choosing a school versus choosing a coach or a coaching staff or a position coach. And I would think that those ties to Oklahoma would be a bit stronger for those recruits that are a little bit closer to home, meaning Oklahoma and Texas student athletes rather than somewhere else. You would think that maybe are really impressed with the campus, the school, the education, what they know of some of the teammates that they'll have there, those things, versus those particular players that are making a determination more on the head coach, the position coach, and have that attachment. The other thing that comes to mind, and we dealt with this in responding to the news of Brian Kelly, as you alluded to, leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU, and some of the things that Notre Dame is dealing with that are exactly the same to Oklahoma. You went through and gave an overview of the tangible losses and recovery that has to take place. I would also think at a place like Oklahoma and Notre Dame that there's this psychological hit that the fan base, that the institution, that the football program is taking, because there being a thought that where else is there to go? There is nowhere else to go in college football that exceeds our status And it's never happened to us where somebody is looking elsewhere within college football to move on to a seemingly, at least for them, if not just an overall look, to be a better place. It hasn't happened at Notre Dame. It hasn't happened at Oklahoma. And now a bit of a psychological hit that there are other places to coach and other places that may be deemed as good as here or better.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Mark. We had this conversation, I believe it was on Sunday, about the first time that I know that you mentioned the first time that we've seen a coach leave for what is perceived as a lateral move from Oklahoma to USC, and so we saw that on Sunday, and it did. We agree that it's been a long time, if ever, and it happened 2 days later. I mean, you can make an argument between Notre Dame and LSU. Me personally, not getting off the beaten path too much, but I think Notre Dame's still probably a better job, but still at the very least, it's somewhat lateral. So yeah, no, I think it's interesting on both fronts, really, Mark. So kind of alluding to your first point around from a recruiting perspective, yeah, I think there's a when you have some of these local kids, specifically the kids in the state of Oklahoma, that they have committed to a school more so and a program more so than they have maybe an individual coach or the head coach or the assistant coach. But when you get to a place nationally, I think a lot of the way that a lot of these kids view recruiting and where they're going at the next level, they're looking at a combination of a program, a head coach, an assistant coach that they think this is the combination of situations and people that will be able to get me to the next level. To be able to, because at the end, this is for some of these kids, this is practice for what is going to be their career, their full-time job going forward. So I think there's intrigue as far as that goes. I think what we saw a little bit just on social media yesterday was a lot of these, and there's been a few national kids, but a lot of local kids really just trying to, I don't know if buck the trend is the right thing to say, but really just kind of putting up a united front saying, hey, we're all in on Oklahoma, the program, versus Oklahoma, who the head coach was at that point. So I think a lot of these other kids are starting to follow suit in the 2022 class. So, there was Gabe Dindy is a guy that we had talked about that recently committed to Oklahoma. He posted on Instagram that he was still definitely committing to Oklahoma as of right now. And, some of those things change from time to time. And there's been a little bit of an exodus. Spencer Rattler, which was expected, announced that he's hitting the transfer portal. Theo Weiss, Jaden Hazelwood, those two as well have really kind of decided that, but as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see who the coach is and if that changes some of their minds. But yeah, I think so that from a recruiting perspective. But then to your last point about about maybe the program not being as or the being as invincible maybe as they once were. I mean, I think we had this debate, Mark, last night with our last word on college football colleagues in terms of how does Oklahoma, how does LSU, how does Notre Dame, how does USC, how do they rank in terms of the top 10 jobs in the country? And I think they're all there, right? I think they're all somewhere littered into the top 10, top 15 area. There's advantages and there's disadvantages of all places. I mean, Notre Dame, just the name itself from a program perspective, brings in so much respect and so much tradition, but at the same time, they have some difficult admittance standards that have hampered that program from time to time. But when you also look at it, they have a much you could make the argument they have an easier path to a college football playoff without having to play in a conference. Whereas at LSU, you've got a rabid fan base. You've got incredible facilities and amazing, maybe one of the best environments on a Saturday in college football. But then again, maybe kind of the Lincoln Riley fact that you decide to go somewhere else that gives you an easier path to win a championship, and going from Notre Dame to LSU maybe gives you a little bit of a tougher path. Maybe it's easier to recruit there, bring in the players that you want, but the path may be a little bit more difficult. But yeah, I think we're seeing not that any of these programs are going to fall by the wayside. They're always going to be, well, maybe I should say always, but they're very much in the forefront of being a blue blood. But I think maybe the conversation is a little bit different. Maybe parity is more of a thing than it has been in the past in terms of kids wanting to to go different places and things like that. But I think it'll be a test for these two programs going forward over the next couple of years to see how quickly they're able to bounce back from something like this.
Chad and others in the live chat bring up a good point. If you look at the programs that you're talking about, and we collect them all and make a list, almost all of them own that community, if not that state, meaning beyond campus, the state's all in. Michigan, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, LSU, they have rabid fan bases throughout the state and beyond, of course, but concentrated in that state and in that area. USC and Miami, they have large fan bases. Obviously, they couldn't run football programs at the magnitude that they do. But without thinking of anyone else, I can't really put anyone else in this category. They run elite programs, or in Miami's case, at one point ran an elite program, and wherever you want to categorize them at this point, there's still a power program. There's still a top 25 type program. And it's as evidenced by the stadium on game day, and it's the worst at Miami of any top 25 type program. And at USC, we see it when they're down. You don't have that game day experience. You don't have that loyalty, that allegiance that place is going to be packed regardless of what the record is. To look at what's going on at Miami or USC on a game day versus Nebraska being 3-9 and still packing the place, that town, that state, that region is sold on Nebraska football, and they are dedicated. Where you go to USC, you go to Los Angeles, and you better win and maybe even entertain people on top of that, or you're going to get lost because you're competing with the Dodgers and the Lakers and the Chargers and all the way through the Rams. And it's just a different entertainment scene and a different allegiance. And there may be positives and negatives to both. If you want that college environment where you are basically the governor and everyone just loves your program. But if you're losing, you don't get lost in the scene. You are even more focused on in a negative way at Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama versus USC or Miami, where you just get lost in the scene. And sure, your rabid fan base that's spread all over the country is upset, but you're not going to have 100,000 people booing you on game day. You're going to have like 28,000 people that are apathetic there on game day.
No, you're exactly right. And I think, I didn't catch a lot of it, but I caught some of the cliff notes of the press conference that Riley had at USC. And yeah, I think they alluded to that just in terms of, the fan base is not anywhere near what he has been used to at Oklahoma. Now, I mean, the thing that he mentioned that is true, and you had kind of mentioned it here as well, that if you have a winner, the fans are going to come. I mean, and you have to win big. You have to be a big winner for the fans to be there. But there is a path to have that support. But yeah, at the same time, that's more pressure on him, I think, just to win and win big early on. And I think that's going to be the expectation, right? Specifically for the amount of money that they're giving him, the amount of money that they're willing to give him to, kind of bring in the assistance that he wants. But so I think that's the pressure. But to your point, Mark, at the same time, you don't have that fan base there immediately. I mean, you're going to have um, you have it's a professional city, and it's a professional type of I think moniker around that program. So yeah, they're going to have to, and they've not won big really since what, Pete Carroll. I mean, I think that's the last time with it where they've actually really consistently won big, and so and when I say big, I mean, I'm thinking 9-10 win season, challenging for the Pac-12 championship. So yeah, I mean, so I think that the pressure maybe looks different at a place like USC than it does at Oklahoma, or as you mentioned, Nebraska being 3-9 and having that the crowd be a constant, no matter if you're 3-9 or 10-2. But in a place like Oklahoma, the fans are going to be behind you as well, kind of regardless of where you're at. So yeah, I think it'll be. I think that is something that is kind of going to be kind of new to him, that he'll have to get used to. I mean, I think he'll be successful, but at the same time, he's going to be expected to win big very quickly.
Jason, not to focus too much on Lincoln Riley and USC. Obviously, we're here to talk about Oklahoma's future. We've got about a half hour, but briefly, because it's being raised in the live chat and it's an interesting conversation. And I had a number of people reach out to me yesterday, both publicly and privately, with their sentiment about Lincoln Riley's lack of fill in the blank, class, loyalty, allegiance, so forth in doing this. And you can look at it basically two ways. Number one, yes, he should have been more forthright about the LSU comment. He should fulfill his commitment. Oklahoma's done a lot for him. He has some debt of gratitude there, debt of service to Oklahoma. Okay. On the other side, business is business. If somebody's going to offer you more money at a job, most likely you're going to leave your current employer and only be as loyal as your last paycheck and move on to another opportunity. And you're going to do that as best you can and give them 2 weeks or whatever time to make a transition. But this is a different situation in a different business. So, what are your thoughts about that? Because, I remind people that it's impossible to leave a coaching job. There is no good time to leave a coaching job in terms of, yes, he recruited and signed those players. There was a unwritten contract there that I'm your head coach. I'm bringing you to this institution, and I'm going to be, an extension of your family and the coaching staff. But at the same time, a coach would never leave a job if that were a lifetime contract. So it's an impossible move to make, and to make it clean.
Yeah, you're right, and I think, Mark, Bob Stoops is probably the only one. He's not the only one that's done this, but just from a timing perspective, him deciding to step down in the June-July timeframe, was about as good as it can be. So to your point, Mark, when a majority of these coaching changes happen, this is the timing. So I think this is when it happens. So I think I think Oklahoma fans and people within the program can't be too upset at that. And to your point, more money, and I think some of the things that I've heard, I think it's probably more about not necessarily wanting to compete in the SEC. Based, this isn't. Yes, I think the United Front has been something very dissimilar from what Lincoln Riley has said, and then what Joe Castiglione said yesterday. But here's why I think, and I've heard this from multiple sources, so I really feel comfortable in saying this, and this was not something that just materialized on Sunday. This was not something that just materialized this week. I've heard from multiple people that this was something Oklahoma and USC were in contact with each other as early as late September, early October. I was basically made aware of that when, and I think we talked about it here on this show, but in the bye week, Oklahoma between I believe it was between Texas Tech and Baylor, Oklahoma had a bye week, and Lincoln Riley was unavailable. He did not. He was unavailable for his Tuesday morning typical weekly press conference that he has, and then Wednesday coaching show that he has. And his comment at that point was that he was, he was not available, but he said the story is much more boring than people would like it to believe. I don't really think that's the case based on what I've heard. I think that he has, he was continuing that conversation with USC, and this is multiple sources that I trust. So I think those things. This has been kind of a constant, really ebb and flow type of situation. So I feel for the players, honestly, more so than anyone. I think over the last month, I've kind of heard that the assistant coaches thought something was going on inside. Over really the last month, Mark. I think Lincoln was the vibe that I heard. He was just acting weird. He was asking for more input from his offensive coaches on game plan type of stuff, which they said he's not ever done in the 5 years that he's been there. And he was just something just really seemed off. So I think the thought that this all kind of materialized on Sunday is kind of laughable. Because I think from what I heard, Oklahoma, like Bob Stoops, Joe Castiglione, President Joe Harris, kind of got wind of this on Thursday, Friday, and I think from what I understand, this was a done deal during the week. They were just essentially waiting for Oklahoma season to end. So, you know, I definitely agree with you that the timing is what it has to be, right? I mean, I think it's unfortunate because that it's so close to the early signing period, but it is what it has to be, right? I mean, it's the reason why Brian Kelly did it last night. The decision was last night, so I think that was it just is what it is. So I think as an Oklahoma person, you can don't be upset necessarily with the timing, maybe be upset with the deceit and what Riley had did throughout the season in terms of having 1 foot out the door and having 1 foot coaching, which can be a distraction, obviously, for him, can be a distraction for the assistant coaches, and maybe not necessarily the players, because I think the coaches probably kept that to themselves or, talked amongst themselves. But I think that is I think that's something that could be a distraction, and probably maybe at least part of the reason why Oklahoma struggled as much as they did this year, based on who they had, who we thought that they had. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where that's at. And I wanted to talk about one thing real quick before we move on to there was some discussion about Spencer Rattler potentially following Lincoln to USC. I give that about a 1% chance of being accurate based on some of the things that I had heard. I even heard that Lincoln reached out to Spencer yesterday, and Spencer basically just wished him good luck. So I don't think that he'll probably be using going to USC. I mean, I do think it will be could possibly be a Pac-12 team. Based on where he was from. But yeah, I don't think that he will be following Lincoln to USC right now.
So what about Caleb Williams?
So I think from what I understand about Caleb is that was the first conversation that Bob and Joe and the administration had with them. Um, I think there was a conversation that was had Sunday, and I think there was another conversation that happened yesterday. For everything that I'm hearing, I think he is in a wait and see mode. He's not, he's not announcing he's going through the portal. So I fully intend on him. I fully expect him to be the quarterback um, for the bowl game. Now I think he's looking to see who Oklahoma brings in. I initially, when we talked Sunday, Mark, I kind of gave it a 50-50 shot, leaned more towards him probably leaving. I probably lean more the other way now based on some things that I'm hearing. As long as the coach and the offensive coordinator is one that he feels somewhat comfortable with, I think he'll probably stay. A variety of reasons, I think if he stays here, he's the unquestioned number one guy, the starter going into the season. If he goes with Riley to USC or goes somewhere else for that matter, but specifically if he goes with Riley to USC, he's got Jackson Dart that he has to battle against next year, and maybe even I don't know and I don't know about Slovis if he's coming back or if he's still he's not a senior, is he? I don't think, but if he'll be part of the mix as well. So yeah, no, I think I feel a little bit better about Caleb Williams than I did on Sunday.
Oklahoma Live Special Edition. Jason Ray's on the line, as always, from Last Word on College Football. So check out his work right there. We're, of course, reviewing the Oklahoma situation, which is being stated here from Ryan, a very rare situation in a positive light, that a coach of the caliber of Bob Stoops, both in name recognition and in ability and experience, can step in. The only situation I can liken it to at that caliber would be Barry Alvarez has done that twice at Wisconsin, where he's been far removed from his coaching career and transitioned to coach. One time when Brett Bielema left, the other time, I guess, when Gary Anderson left and was dismissed from his job. One time he coached in a Rose Bowl, Barry Alvarez. The other time was a one of the Florida games, Outback Bowl, Citrus Bowl for Wisconsin. And I believe he won one of those two games. I think he lost the Rose Bowl to Oregon, but they were very competitive down to the final possession. But that's the only time in which I can think of somebody of that stature that's been removed from the game for quite a bit of time, stepping in and taking the reins for bowl season.
Yeah, no, I think that's the only one that I can remember as well. So, I mean, Oklahoma is very fortunate to have a guy like that that's able and willing to jump in and like I said, not just be a head coach, but be willing to kind of help out with the recruiting, talk to the parents and things like that, do everything that he can to kind of keep the wheels on the bus. So it's a very unique situation, and I think he did a lot to kind of help calm the fan base in general yesterday.
Yeah, so if he didn't do enough in terms of wins and losses and championships on the field, I think the OU fan base and community should and will take this into consideration in years and decades to come in evaluating Bob Stoops and his legacy at Oklahoma. It's a pretty special one. Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football. We talk Oklahoma football every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. This is a special edition. We appreciate Jason being here to recap what was discussed at the news conference and what looks to be possible going forward for Oklahoma. So, in the remaining time that we have, these candidates go anywhere from what seems to be a reasonable list of Lanning, Venables, Aranda, Campbell, and others. And then people take it, Urban Meyer always gets thrown in as a wish list of some people when talking about a national job like this. So what are your preferences? What are your what does your candidate list look like in regards to preferences versus what seems to be reasonable or possible?
So I think first and foremost, one of the things that was interesting listening to the press conference yesterday from Joe Castiglione is he had really had mentioned that that there was a ton of people that reached out has already reached out to Oklahoma, and indeed a lot of people that a lot of us on the outside looking in wouldn't have thought that anybody like that would have been interested. So don't know if those are existing head coaches, assistants from our coordinators maybe from across the country that most people wouldn't think of. So so I thought that was interesting, an interesting comment. He kind of talked about the understanding the speed in which he really needs to go through to go through this and get someone named. So I think in terms of yeah, and like you said, it's always kind of funny to notice that Mark, this with coaching searches, there's just some funny names that kind of come out of the woodwork. So I think here's the list that a couple of guys on the list that I think is either being contacted or are part of it. I think Brent Venables, I think, is number one on the list of many Oklahoma fans, previous players, and I think probably administration. I think that I'll just say I feel pretty strongly that it's not a done deal, but fairly close with Venables. So let's go on the other side and say let's for whatever reason um, doesn't necessarily work out with Venables. I'm hearing more and more that Matt Rule would potentially be a possibility. No, he's currently at Carolina. I don't, some of the things that I've heard that he's not really necessarily, in love with the NFL game. So wouldn't be surprised to see him come back. Dave Aranda is a guy, a name that's been mentioned. I think it would take a bit to get him away from Baylor. As odd as that sounds, I think he just loves he loves the program there. He loves what he's building there. So I think I think that's one. I think Luke Fickell is a name that I've heard. Although he may be more of a candidate for Notre Dame, maybe a better fit for him for Notre Dame. I've heard Lane Kiffin, his name mentioned a bit. I think more so, Mark, from the perspective of Oklahoma feels like they probably need to get a guy, whether it be from a head coaching perspective or an assistant, that really has a lot of inroads within the SEC, just to kind of usher that new era in for Oklahoma, whenever that might be. So. Those are some of the people that I've heard. Mark Stoops is another guy name that I've heard a little bit early on. But at this point, Mark, I would be, I think, and of course you mentioned Urban Meyer. I think it's one of those that kind of gets linked to any job opening that comes up at the college level, especially a big time job. So I think, but I think the baggage that comes, and to a certain extent, Lane Kiffin as well, but I think specifically the baggage that comes with a guy like Urban Meyer that I don't think Castiglione would touch, in a million years. I mean, I could be surprised, hey, they could surprise me on both ends and him deciding to be offered and take the job. But I think, like I said, I think Venables is right now for me is the clear leader in the clubhouse. I think his affinity for Oklahoma, coached at Oklahoma from 1999 until like 2011, as the either the singular defensive coordinator or the co-defensive coordinator at Oklahoma. So he still has a big affinity for the program and just for the people around here. So he's turned down a ton of head coaching jobs. So I think this is a job that I find it hard to believe that he would potentially not take if given the opportunity. So I would say right now, of course, this could absolutely change by the time we talk tomorrow, Mark. But I think right now, based on what I'm hearing, is I think it's evolving pretty rapidly in a positive way for Oklahoma and Venables.
I've always said that two of the more fascinating places to be in sports that we have no access to would be an NFL draft room and whatever conversations lead up to the actual day of the draft. But just to hear the evaluation of players, the other aspects that go into that conversation of how to make that move, and the debates and arguments that go back and forth to determine what goes on in selecting 7 rounds of an NFL draft. I've always thought that would be fascinating. And then also to sit in at the back of the room during these coaching interviews and to hear the status of a Notre Dame, LSU, Oklahoma job opening, and what they're asking these guys and what that conversation looks and sounds like would be fascinating.
Oh, it really would. And I think right now, Mark, I think right now Joe even discussed this yesterday and was talking about the fact that they're moving much quicker than they have before. So, they're doing everything that they could to reach out. And he even, he played his hand a little bit. He said, yeah, there's some potential people that are involved in, conference championships and, still playing that, they're trying to figure out the best approach to reaching out to those individuals with still being respectful, to what they're going through, still in season. So, I think that probably speaks to Luke Fickell more than probably anyone in terms of being a guy. But yeah, he's, like I said, he mentioned there was quite a few people that have expressed interest, and there's people that we wouldn't think of. So I think and another interesting thing, Mark, is, I think over the last 2 hires for Oklahoma, Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley have both been coordinators and have not been, with no head coaching experience. So, that's kind of the model that he's had over the last couple of times from a football perspective as well. So I think that could be a method that he continues to go through.
As someone mentioned in the chat, this move to the SEC for both Texas and Oklahoma looking different than it did just a couple months ago. And we'll see when that actually does take place. That's another key in not necessarily just the Oklahoma situation pertaining to coaching, but just the landscape of college football that we have yet to find out when that move is going to make officially on the field. But boy, based on what Texas showed us this year against the likes of Kansas and the rest of the Big 12, and now Oklahoma making a key decision about who's going to lead its program into the SEC against Brian Kelly and everyone else. Wow, just the hits keep coming, and the the shifting landscape of college football.
Yeah, you're right, Mark, and there's going to be so much ripple effect. This coaching carousel season, more so than we've seen in the past. I think it looks like we're seeing. I saw this morning where it looks like the Penn State defensive coordinator is going to get the head coaching job at Virginia Tech. So there's so many ripple effects, not only head coaching from a head coaching perspective, but also from an assistant perspective as well. So I think that's a very interesting part of it, and I think also an interesting part of it for Oklahoma is who. If it is Venables, who he brings in from an assistant perspective. I've heard a lot of I've heard a lot of noise about Jeff Levy at Ole Miss, offensive coordinator. Of course, he was previously at Baylor, went to Oklahoma, has got Oklahoma ties. So I think that would be interesting. Phil Longo from North Carolina is another guy that I've kind of heard. Potentially Jeff Scott is another guy that I've heard in terms of offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator guys that I've heard. I've heard Jimmy Lake's name thrown about a little bit. Again, with the baggage that he has, a little bit, not extensively, not anywhere near what what a coach like Urban Meyer has, but that's a name that I've heard. I do think that if it is Venables, he will hire a defensive coordinator. I do not think that he will be the one. Obviously, he'll be involved as the head coach, but I don't think he would be the defensive coordinator. I think this is not necessarily a pipe dream, unlikely. I haven't heard anything really kind of reputable about this, but I've heard some things possibly about Gary Patterson would be interested in coming to Oklahoma as a defensive coordinator. So those things will kind of come to light, I think, as the week grows old. But the things that I've heard, maybe anywhere between 24 to 72 hours, Oklahoma, if it is Venables, Oklahoma will be in position to name him within the week.
Folks, we talk Oklahoma football every Wednesday, typically every Wednesday, and we will do it again this Wednesday. So tomorrow, join us again for Oklahoma football talk at our regular time at 11:30 Central on Wednesday. We wanted to put this together to cover the news conference and, of course, the news that is constantly evolving, and more so just the list of candidates for the head coach and the coordinator positions and the role of Bob Stoops. And we got Jason Ray here from Last Word on College Football. So head on over to Last Word on College Football. Check out Jason's work right there. All right. Anything else we have yet to hit?
No, I don't think so. It's just this stuff is going to move quickly. There's a lot of moving parts, but we'll hopefully be in a position to give more credible updates on tomorrow at this time.
All right. Very good. Well, Jason, you have a great day. Appreciate you doing this and updating everyone on where we stand.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
Folks, we've got a Miami live show at 1:15 Eastern time on the Miami channel. Iowa going to a Big Ten championship game. Iowa live on the Iowa channel at 5:30 Eastern. We've got a watch party as well for the college football playoff rankings later tonight at 7 Eastern on the main channel, and a call-in show following. So we will see you soon.